And so I would encourage you, if you're interested in that, come over, have a look for yourself. You can apply on our website to have a factory tour. If you are
weld very nicely or won't weld at all.
Yeah.
But engineer friend here, he's done all the digging. We reckon we can weld this back to original.
Matt Armstrong finished Bugatti, and 3 days later Bugatti opened their factory to the world. Bugatti just opened their doors, not to a billionaire customer, not to a carefully selected automotive journalist with a pre-approved list of questions, and a 2-hour window before the PR team ends a visit to everyone. Suddenly, without warning, right after Matt Armstrong proved to the entire world that their cars could be rebuilt outside their network. And if you think that timing is a coincidence, you have not been paying attention to this story. Because nothing in the relationship between Bugatti and Matt Armstrong has been a coincidence. Not the VIN lock, not the parts refusal, not the CEO's statement, and not this sudden, unprecedented, never-before-seen invitation from one of the most secretive manufacturers in the world is the most shocking development in a story that has produced nothing but shocking developments from the very beginning. And today we are going to tell you exactly what it means, why it happened, what Bugatti is really trying to do, and why Matt Armstrong's proof changed everything inside that factory in motion in ways that the automotive world is only beginning to understand. Think about what it takes for Bugatti to make a move like this. Think about the culture of a company that produces fewer than 100 cars per year. A company where every customer is personally known to the organization. A company that has built its entire identity around exclusivity so extreme that most people will never see one of their cars in real life, let alone get anywhere near the facility where they are built. Bugatti does not open its doors. That is not who they are. That is not how they operate. That is not the brand they have spent decades constructing in the minds of the automotive world. Bugatti's doors are closed by design. The closure is the point. The inaccessibility is the brand. And when a company whose entire value proposition is built on being unreachable suddenly decides to be reachable, suddenly decides to pull back the curtain and invite the world inside, it does not do it casually. It does not do it without a reason. And the reason, in this case, is sitting in a workshop in Leicester looking like a fully restored Bugatti Chiron per sport. Because Matt Armstrong's proof changed the calculation. Completely, irreversibly. And Bugatti just responded in the most unexpected way possible. But before we get into what this invitation actually means and what Bugatti is really communicating with it, we need to establish the full context of where the story was before the invitation happened. Because the invitation did not arrive in a vacuum. It arrived at the end of a sequence of events that completely transformed the public narrative around Bugatti and independent repair, and what manufacturers can and cannot do control what happens to their cars after the point of sale. And understanding that sequence is essential to understanding why this invitation is so significant and why the timing of it is so deliberate. Because in the world of corporate communications, timing is never accidental. Every major brand decision about when to speak and when to act and when to open and when to close is made with full awareness of the context it lands in. And Bugatti chose the specific moment, right after Matt Armstrong's proof, with complete awareness of what that choice would communicate. The question is what exactly they were trying to communicate. And the answer to that question is more complicated and more interesting than the headline suggests. To understand Bugatti's position going into this moment, you need to understand what Matt Armstrong's completed rebuild actually did to their narrative, not what it did to their cars, not what it did to their part supply or their authorized dealer network or their technical support infrastructure, what it did to their story. The story Bugatti tells about themselves. The story that says these cars are so complex, so extraordinarily engineered, so far beyond the capability of anyone outside their authorized network, that independent repair is not just inadvisable, but genuinely impossible at the level required to do justice to what a Bugatti is. That story served Bugatti for a long time. It served them because it was largely true, not completely true, not true in the absolute way they sometimes implied, but largely true in the practical sense that very few independent operators anywhere in the world had the combination of knowledge, tools, contacts, and determination required to take on a seriously damaged Bugatti and bring it back to the standard these cars deserve. Matt Armstrong changed that, not by arguing with the story, by replacing it with a better one. A true one. A story that millions of people watched unfold in real time, and that ended with a W16 engine running in Leicester, because one man decided impossible was just a challenge he had not solved yet. And a story that powerful, told to an audience that large, does not leave a narrative a challenge intact. It changes it forever. And here is what nobody inside Bugatti expected when this rebuild began. Here is the assumption that turned out to be wrong in a way that changed their entire strategic position. The assumption was that even if Matt Armstrong succeeded in some technical sense, even if he managed to get the car running in some fashion, the result would be visibly imperfect, visibly compromised. That without factory support, without genuine parts, without the calibration expertise that only Bugatti's engineers possess, the finished car would be a testament to the limits of independent repair rather than a proof of its possibility. That it would run, perhaps, but would not be right, would not feel like a Bugatti, would not behave like a Bugatti, would not meet the standard that a Bugatti Chiron per sport demands. And that visible imperfection would be Bugatti's vindication, proof that they were right, that their position was justified, that the warnings their CEO issued were grounded in genuine technical reality rather than corporate protectionism. That assumption was wrong. The car was right. And when it was right, when the proof was undeniable, Bugatti had to make a choice about what came next. And they chose this. An open door, a sudden invitation, a transparency they had never offered before. And the automotive world is still trying to work out exactly what to make of it. Now, let us talk about what the invitation actually involved. Because the details of what Bugatti offered when they opened their doors matter enormously for understanding what they were trying to achieve with the gesture. This was not a press day, not a carefully managed media event with roped-off areas and approved talking points and handlers monitoring every conversation. What Bugatti offered was access, real access, to the factory floor, to the people who build these cars, to the processes and the techniques and the engineering decisions that go into producing fewer than 100 of the most extraordinary road cars on the planet every year. Access that journalists who have covered Bugatti for decades had never been offered. Access that customers who had spent multiple millions on their cars had never received. Access that, in any other context, from any other manufacturer, at any other moment in the story, would have been received as an extraordinary gesture of goodwill and transparency. But this was not any other context. This was right after Matt Armstrong's proof. And that context changed everything about how the gesture landed and what it meant. Because here's a question that the automotive community asked immediately and loudly when the invitation was announced. Why now? Why, after all the years of closed doors and managed access and carefully controlled narrative? Why right now? Right after the rebuild that Bugatti publicly opposed was completed successfully. Right after the proof that the cars could be worked on outside their network was delivered to an audience of millions. Right after the EU right to repair legislation had moved from a distant possibility to an approaching reality. Why right now? And the answer that the most thoughtful observers arrived at was not a comfortable one for Bugatti. Because the most honest answer to why now is that Matt Armstrong's proof changed the cost-benefit calculation of secrecy. For as long as the story Bugatti told about their cars, the story about unreachable complexity and the necessity of authorized repair was uncontested in public, the closed doors served their purpose. They protected the mystique. They maintained the narrative. They supported the exclusivity that justified the price. But once that story had been contested and defeated in public, once millions of people had watched the alternative story play out to its conclusion, the closed doors stopped protecting the narrative and started undermining it. Because closed doors in the wake of Matt Armstrong's proof no longer said we are exclusive and special. They said we are hiding something. And that is not the message Bugatti wanted to send. But here is what nobody was saying in the immediate coverage of this invitation. Here is a layer of this story that the surface analysis missed completely. The invitation was not just about managing the narrative around independent repair. It was about something bigger. Something that the Matt Armstrong situation had exposed that went beyond the question of whether a YouTuber could rebuild a Bugatti. The invitation was about trust. Specifically about the collapse of a certain kind of trust that manufacturers had always assumed they could take for granted. The trust of the automotive community in the idea that manufacturers knew best, that their judgments about what was and was not possible for their cars were grounded in genuine technical expertise, rather than commercial interest. Matt Armstrong's rebuild did not just prove that independent repair was possible. It proved that some of what manufacturers said about the impossibility of independent repair was not about technical reality. It was about control. And when an audience of millions understands that distinction, when they see it demonstrated rather than just argued, the trust that manufacturers had in their authority to define what is and is not possible with their cars takes a hit. That open doors and factory access and unprecedented transparency are designed to begin repairing, because trust, once damaged, requires action to rebuild. And Bugatti just took an action. Now let's talk about Mate Rimac himself. Because the CEO who made that public statement about Matt Armstrong's rebuild, the statement that backfired so comprehensively and became one of the defining moments in the public narrative of the story, is the same person who authorized this invitation. And understanding Mate Rimac as a person, beyond his role as the head of one of the world's most exclusive automotive brands, is essential to understanding why this invitation happened and what it represents. Because Rimac is not a traditional automotive executive. He did not come up through the ranks of an established manufacturer. He built his own company from nothing. He was a builder before he was a CEO. And builders, genuine builders, have a relationship with demonstrated proof that corporate executives trained in brand management and communication strategy simply do not have. When Matt Armstrong's proof arrived, when the car was done and running and undeniably right, Rimac the builder understood what had been achieved in a way that Rimac the CEO may have preferred not to understand. And the invitation that followed is, in part, the response of a builder to another builder's proof, a recognition, a respect, expressed in the only language that makes sense between people who make things with their hands. Let me show you how we do it, because you just showed us what you can do. And here is where the story takes a turn that nobody predicted. Here's a development that emerged from the invitation that changed the conversation around Matt Armstrong and Bugatti in a way that the original conflict never could have produced. Because when the doors opened, when the access was granted and the factory floor became visible and the people who build these cars became part of the public conversation, something happened that Bugatti had not planned for and Matt Armstrong had not expected. The engineers talked, not in a managed, PR-approved, carefully scripted way, in the way that people who are genuinely passionate about what they build talk when they are given a real audience for the first time. They talked about the challenges, about the compromises, about the decisions made during the Chiron's development that created the specific complexities that made Matt Armstrong's rebuild so difficult. And in talking about those challenges and being honest about the engineering realities in a way that Bugatti's public communications had never been, they inadvertently validated everything Matt Armstrong had said about the difficulty of what he accomplished.